the due dates of life. And for students, the due dates of life have to do with homework and assignments and things like that. Obviously, due dates evolve over time as we build more responsibilities and take on more challenges. But the theme of this is around due dates. So I'd love to kind of hear maybe if there's a question you want me to get out of this. Yana, yes.
So my husband had the question when I sent him the invitation. He said, shouldn't we be having this conversation with the teachers?
There's a part of this that may go back to the teachers. As a teacher, I feel like I might be talking to parents and other teachers at the same time. I would also be talking to administrators in this presentation. But to be honest, a lot of this starts in the home. And so I think, education is the byproduct of the community. And educational norms and values are town-based, and they're based on the collective views of the community, ideally. That's why we have an educational board in each town. That's why we elect representatives and things like that. So it's not bad to start these conversations with parents and then see how it empowers parents to maybe talk to their teachers in a certain way that allows this type of the true skills that we're trying to work on to move into the classroom. So that's a great point. Any other questions?
Not immediately.
Okay. So coming out of a pandemic still, and some of our students are continue to demonstrate lagging skills. Maybe maybe they're still a little bit behind in developing some of those age-appropriate skills that we see, showing themselves in the inability to maybe independently manage academic responsibilities of their peers. And so, coming out of a pandemic, it's important to kind of recognize that. And from that type of vein, I speak as a teacher and as a parent and as a executive function coach. I see the ongoing challenges that not just are presented to our students as they struggle with due dates, but also with teachers as they struggle with what to do with the struggling students with due dates. And I also see with parents as they also struggle with what to do with their struggling student having a hard time managing due dates. So this is not a game of finger pointing. This is a moment to really reflect and take stock in what's really most important skills we want to embolden with our children, and maybe how that empowers teachers to maybe become a little bit more authentic with what due dates are and what they are not, and how that translates into long-term development of skills. And I'll get into what that looks like. For those that are just joining, I did ask, what questions would you like me to address in this topic? Maybe it's related to your child, maybe it's not. But you can throw it into the chat if that helps, and I can respond to it as we move through this talk. Okay. And I'm going to go over to my presentation. See if I can switch slides here. Okay. So the truth about really due dates is it's really kind of a phrase used or a term used that the tasks of life can sometimes have a finite ending point to them, right? And so in our children, the developmental milestones of being a student has a lot to do with meeting the prerequisites, developing those prerequisite skills of managing responsibilities and those responsibilities do fall under homework. Nowadays, students get far less homework than they ever did, but that doesn't diminish the struggle. It just is a truth. Students are getting far less homework than they had in the past. And that's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. I think it's just a good recognition that the typical 3 to 5 hours for a student may have been an old school way of looking at the amount of work a kid has to do in the evening. Either way, we still see, even with 1 or 2 assignments, we can still see those same students struggle. And I think we add in the complexity of other addictive-like platforms that have very high dopamine impact and are very stimulating, and how that conflicts with the boredom of homework, the mundaneness of homework, and somewhat the lack of meaning around homework, where they're seeing more meaning in video games or social media, meaning via maybe dopamine or social connections, than in the maintenance of homework. So we can't really discredit, or we can acknowledge that's true. And so, but I think it's very important for us as parents, before we jump into a school year, to really sit down with our children and just make sure that we're all on the same page, that due dates are there's an interest, or there's an intention of teaching the management of due dates that we can't ignore. And we should spend time with our kids understanding the value, intrinsic value, but also the kind of the engagement of and the stepping stones that due dates have in the scope of life. So I'm going to touch on all these points, but the truth is as we think about the long-term benefits of teaching our kids, having our kids work through the importance of due dates, it really does have long-term benefits that will connect a lot of dots in terms of their future. I do see that working with adults, it's sad to see that for some adults, they never really pursue their goals and their dreams in life because they struggled so much with being able to self-initiate the task management of the process towards goals, right? So maybe it was getting a college degree. Maybe it was pursuing an engineering degree. Maybe it was managing certain jobs which required a high level of project management responsibilities, and having maybe failed at those goals because of these lagging skills, and being able to really kind of go back to the basics of being able to see due dates as being finite and not as negotiable, and being able to build an internal and external process to manage it. So and so that's really a big deal, and I think it has somewhat a little bit to do with one of the major points is it really does, and we kind of back up for a second. When you see teachers, and this is something that I think parents and teachers need to acknowledge, is when a teacher has a flexible due date, many teachers are looked at as being, those teachers are really nice. They're really, they're really supportive of my child or all of the children. And those flexible due dates gives my struggling child a chance to get that work done and get it passed in at the end of a semester, get it passed in at the end of the quarter without there being too much stigma on their grade. And that's all fine and good. But when we really back that up and we look at the true cost of that, the true cost of having optional due dates, or having negotiable due dates, or having flexible due dates, is our children aren't learning the true value or the true importance of having being accountable and responsible for these due dates right in front of them. And so what it does end up kind of perpetuating for a lot of our kiddos is this chronic cycle of catching up, this chronic cycle of just task completion at the very end, or task completion or catching up and the piling up of work at the very end, without developing those prerequisites or spending their time on those prerequisites, right? So it's not really a lack of accountability, meaning the kiddos don't want accountability or they don't want to learn it. It's just we sometimes ignore the possibility of building those accountabilities because there's this oh, I can just do it later kind of pattern and cognitive pattern and emotional pattern that our students kind of start to lean on. And that's let's acknowledge the pandemic has somewhat exacerbated that, because due dates didn't matter during the pandemic. But as we shift out of that, it is very important, us as a community, to really reset. And how do we do that? That's a conversation within each school, within each classroom, within each leadership team on how we do that. There was a question. Shall I answer it now? That'd be awesome. Kristen, is it okay if I answer your question now? Would that be helpful?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? It wasn't a question. It was more of an observation. I came in late. I probably didn't follow the rules.
There's no rules. No rules at all. Would you like to share it out loud, or is that, or you want me to hold off till later?
No, sure, I can. I'm actually a public middle school teacher, and we are mandated to accept late work for full credit until the last day of school. So this year, all of a sudden, it's the third week of June, and we all have students turning in assignments from October, from September, and we're not allowed to take points off. And every teacher in the building is screaming that, you know, there are real world implications for letting students do this, and nobody higher up wants to listen. And it's very frustrating. And I know that it's happening in a lot of schools and a lot of buildings.
Yeah, and that somewhat is a little bit of the precursor to this type of presentation. Is it does go all the way up to the school board. Mm-hmm. And who's responsible for the school board? It's the members of the community that elect the school board. So it is a community issue. And I think as we acknowledge the true cost, I deal with I work with a lot of college students, and a lot of those college students will say more times than not that if I was taught how to manage due dates in high school and middle school, I wouldn't be in the problem. I wouldn't be struggling the way I am in college. So again, it's hard to do finger pointing because teachers have to respond to the leadership team. Leadership team is accountable to the parents and the bigger. You know, so it's really a vicious cycle of where do we stop this? How do we get off this train and reset? And I think I'm hoping this type of topic, this type of conversation allows us to kind of go back to the true essence of due dates and what's the real, what are we trying to teach, right? And so I've kind of summarized this a little bit already, but this lack of responsibility, I think when we're raising children and we're trying to raise responsible children, we're trying to raise independent children that understand how to be accountable to their roles and responsibilities in life, whether it's a fourth grader, fifth grader, seventh grader, ninth grader, is teaching the importance of managing responsibilities. And one of the most important, it's not the only one, right? I'm going to get into what other responsibilities there are, but one of the major responsibilities is managing due dates of homework. And so now who's responsible for that? Well, we put it on the teacher to be responsible for that. But I kind of want to flip the script a little bit and say, we as a community are responsible for that. Honestly, I think teachers would be better off emotionally if they just didn't have due dates. Because as soon as they start putting due dates in place in strict guidelines, they get pretty ostracized for it, and the community, and I think we've kind of acknowledged why. So it really doesn't start with a teacher, it does start with the community, but what does it mean to teach responsibility, right? And so, and the truth is if a child's learning that due dates are optional and I could just pass things in a semester, there's significant ramifications to that in terms of how that type of how that permissive like behavior can lead into cycles of learned helplessness, and I think we want to acknowledge that. But building a strong sense of accountability, I think I want to get out of the classroom for a second and just kind of look at what the game of building a sense of accountability and responsibility in our children. It doesn't have to be just homework, right? It can be looking at just having conversations with your children around what are the expectations in our family, and what does it look like to be an active member of this family managing age-appropriate responsibilities. Now, as a younger kid, it's typically the chores of life. It's the daily maintenance of responsibilities that are an extension of the family, right? Maybe it's cleaning up after dinner. Maybe it's doing the trash every day. Maybe it's emptying the dishwasher. Maybe it's cleaning up. Maybe it's vacuuming. Either way, there's a responsibility that we can set timelines on and we can set due dates on. Like every morning something happens, every evening something happens. So those are very similar to what this kind of idea of homework. It's put more in the context of one of the most biggest priority in our life, and that is our family. Top priority is health. Second most important priority is family. So if I'm building a sense of purpose and a sense of expectation and a sense of accountability within my family, that's a really helpful starting point, right? We don't want this first starting point to be homework. That's not really the best idea when raising children, is to teach responsibility in relation to homework. It's too abstract to them. Start with the family. And then having authentic conversations about what the priorities are in life. I say it gets complicated. I'm talking fast, sorry. Please just ask me if you want me to slow down. But one way we have kind of confused our children in relation to priorities is we teach them how to play a sport before we teach them how to study. We teach them how to play a sport and we give them coaches on 3 or 4 different sports before we truly teach them how to learn. So when it comes time to learn, like reading, active reading strategies, active learning strategies, the management of learning, it takes a back seat to their busy athletic schedule, which is not a judgment. It's just, we got to acknowledge that and see that for what it is. Our students are walking into middle school, many of them, seeing not a student athlete, but seeing an athlete student. And because of looking at their habits and the amount of attention we put to developing the athlete. And so we have to shift the script a little bit. And sometimes just having a transparent dialogue around that can be step one, building the awareness to it. And how do we help them shift their attention, their kind of intellectual attention, their emotional attention, and their behavior to be more aligned with, no, being a student comes first. And if you are failing in your classes, no, I'm not going to wait for the school to drop you out of sports. I'm going to drop you out of sports. Why? Because school comes first, right? And so why is that a hard line? It's not really a hard line. It's just an honest line, right? If you're sick, you don't go to school. Even if a kid wants to go to school, you're too sick to go to school, kiddo. You get a rest of it. Why? Because health is more important than school, right? So we can see of that also as an appropriate hierarchy. And then developing appropriate consequences. Sometimes the natural consequences, like I forgot my lunch for school. All right, well, you got to go through the day without lunch, and then you probably won't forget your lunch again. And then there's maybe parent imposed ones, like having a phone contract or just having something written down that represents what is expected in relation to the priorities of decision making. Right. And what does it look like to break those rules or to not meet those expectations? That starts in the home. And sometimes we see this quiet, deference to the teachers of the classroom. And I think that's somewhat of that's obviously not helpful. It's not working, but in kind of looking at the teacher, I think we start in the home, we're going to get a better result from our kiddos than if it's kind of seen as being a school issue, because honestly, the due date stuff is not a school issue. I think we're a byproduct of the community, and it starts in the community to start to shift in what teachers, start to do. So that's kind of a big deal. So any questions? I'm maybe kind of tiptoeing on some landmine like topics. So I'm happy to debate them, because that's what I was hoping to kind of create in this conversation. And we don't have a large audience, which might actually make it more enjoyable. Yeah, go ahead.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything you say. Mostly, like in theory and in practice, obviously, it's hard to keep those, don't go without lunch. And then the cost there.
Yana, you're broken up. It's hard to hear you. Sorry.
I'm saying, in theory, because it's hard to play a role. And you're.
Yeah, Yana, we're not able to hear you.
Okay.
It's all. We're just all broken up. It's kind of.
Is it any better? Is
No.
it any better? Okay, it's okay. I'll.
Yeah, now it is.
Okay.
You're better.
I'm sorry. I agree with you in theory completely, but it's hard to be sometimes the worst guy. So yes, you establish the conversation at home. You show them what your priorities are. But if then they go to school and the teacher tells them the more relaxed way, then you're sort of pitted against each other.
Yeah, this is a big ship, and it's not going to right itself with one student in one class. But it has to right itself somehow, and it starts with hundreds of these conversations happening, and honestly just empowering the teachers to get back to what they were taught to do years ago, and that was building values, building skills. Now we're just giving kids homework and accepting it whenever, and this right here, this slide really represents our biggest issue, and that without the management of homework, you don't really have a learning process. And so teachers are really pretty it's really hard for them to teach effectively when there's no accountability to the learning process. And that's where we find teachers struggling the most, is they just want to teach, but they want their students to learn. And if you don't have the accountability for the learning on a day-to-day basis, then it's really hard to fight the distraction, to win at the game, win over the distractions. And it's hard to show up the next day and teach, because half the class didn't have the work done that was required in order to teach the next day. So it is a community issue. It's just teacher by teacher is having to, suffer. It's not, the students are suffering too. I just think as a community, parents are trying maybe in certain ways, and this conversation isn't about parents trying to right the ship themselves, but it is about starting the conversation all over again and being able, can we get back to what matters? Passing in homework at the end of the semester because because my child needs to get a good grade. That doesn't matter. What matters is the teaching of the skills to keep up. And there has to be somewhat of a recognition of that community one. But the learning process is one of the most important pieces. And if we're teaching the learning process and the daily maintenance of it, we'll get there quicker. And for having open, transparent dialogues around the connection between due dates and the learning process. And this is something I don't know if every parent knows, but teachers do. There's a cycle for learning, and this is a pretty basic one. But you have the daily homework, daily classwork that represents the daily skills and learning process that then leads into quizzes. Quizzes might be given. There may be four to six quizzes between every test, right? So you have this cycle of learning, and you have these steps of learning that are very necessary in promoting and checking that students are learning, right? So they're coming in with homework or evidence of having learned the assignment from the night before, done the assignment the night before, proves that they're ready for the next day, right? And whatever that class lesson is, if 70% of the kids are ready for that class because they've done the work, then you're going to have a pretty successful class. But if only 30% of the kids did the work, and you're going to have a very difficult class, because that class was predicated on, the lesson for that day was predicated on having done the work. But for all of our students, without the accountability to have that work done, then it becomes this vicious, this negative spiral, a negative cycle. So, and I think, I don't know, I assume we all know this, but honestly, because I've been teaching so long, that assumption is probably not fair. But the other bigger issue, this might be far more of a student-centered one, is the encouragement of procrastination. Many of the students that we work with that may have ADHD or executive function challenges or other kind of neurodiverse challenges, procrastination is inevitably a pretty typical challenge to begin with. So if you're learning how to just get better at procrastinating because it's working, meaning I can procrastinate still and there's no consequence, then when it is time in life for it really to matter, I haven't really overcome that challenge. And that's our biggest concern as parents, as we watch our kids struggle. That's kind of the boomerang effect, where I want my kid with the skills to leave my house and not come back. Well, it does start with being able to keep up with whatever goals or tasks are part of the daily maintenance of life, right? And some tasks are every day, like homework. Some tasks are every day, like good sleep habits. Some tasks are every day, like taking medication. But some tasks are once a week, like grocery shopping. Some tasks are once a week, like getting together with your partner in college and writing that lab report that's due on Monday. All of those require time management and planning. And when do you start that? Well, if you're not starting in middle school, when do you start? Well, if you're allowing students to pass stuff in late in high school, then when do you start? And they typically go to college, and that's when they start. And by that point, the support systems aren't really what they they're not what they need to be to help those kids. So and so the cost of procrastination, obviously, there's a couple of, I'm going to look at the priorities. Like, so late nights so if a student is procrastinating but still getting the work done, well, they're just putting late nights in, and they're just exhausted the next day. Those are students that have the personal accountability to show up ready, but they still are struggling with the time management skills because they're waiting to the last minute in the wee hours of the night or first thing in the morning, right? Another cost might be the chronic feeling of being overwhelmed. There's nothing, it's really hard to watch students try to catch up with their schoolwork and keep up. right? It's a compounding process, kind of feeling where I still have to kind of move forward with school. I have to keep up with what's in front of me, right? Like do the daily assignments for tomorrow, but I also need to turn around and I need to pile all that stuff that's due from the 2 or 3 or 4 classes where I kind of ignore those assignments. And then I need to put it all together and I need to make a list of what I'm going to do. And I need to time manage that. And I need to plan for that. And then I need to actually initiate it. But I don't want to initiate that. That's overwhelming. There's so much to do. And then I just throw my hands up in the air and I don't do anything that moves me forward and I don't do anything that's moved me back. So we see this chronic cycle all the time. And any teacher that's listening is going to be like, yep. My pitch is always do whatever you can to learn how to keep up. Spend as little time as possible on catching up, because that's the skill we don't want to teach. We just want to teach how to keep up with what's in front of you. That's the skill that's going to take care of your life goals, right? Learning how to clean up is not a goal. It's not a recipe for success in life. So we want to build on those processes that help us move forward. Oh, the other piece is this procrastination leads to really self-deprecating kind of thoughts and conclusions like, oh, I'm dumb. I can't learn. Maybe the potential of what I could do, I don't believe that I can because I didn't learn the skills to keep up. And most students can acknowledge that as kind of a feeling they have. And who let them down? We all did. We all let them down. We didn't focus our attention on building the skills to help them move forward in life. We focused on the skills to help them clean up. Kristen, your hand's up. Is that on purpose? You're on mute.
Yes, and maybe you'll address this later. So it's tough for me as a teacher. I've already kind of let you know how I feel about that. But then as the parent of a high schooler with ADHD, who he absolutely would have failed every single one of his classes this year if it were not for his teachers letting him constantly play catch up with late assignments. And I feel like I do my best to stay on top of what's coming up and what's due in school, but that's very difficult to keep up with when you have other kids too and your own students and all of that. Do you have a recommendation there? Like, there literally have been times when I've thought to myself, you know what, let him fail all his classes and he needs to learn that. But then there's implications later down the road for getting into college. And I feel like as a parent, it's a really, really tricky spot to be in.
Yeah. This presentation has no quick fix or easy solution to it. It does start with having the conversations and what ends up happening, Kristen, I really appreciate your personal example. What can happen with those students is they get so used to spending their life like this, right? And this is how they see their own life, is this chronic game of catching up, that they don't ever really spend the time that they need to. So in these moments, or however many moments you can create, is to make sure that they're always looking forward, right? And so whenever you can hit the reset button and drill down into the skills to move to take care of today. What are the skills to take care of today? What are the skills to take care of tomorrow? What are the skills to take care of this weekend? Right? If I can do that enough times, then maybe I can start to help my kids start to shift. It's just super hard to do that without being able to hit the reset button. So when teachers, and again, there's no easy fix, but I'm not sure when's a better time to fail. I'm not sure if it's better to fail in high school or to fail in college. I'm not sure if it's better to fail fail forward in middle school, right? Or fail forward in high school. I'm not sure. I don't have an answer to any of that. Some kids just grow up and they figure it out. And a lot do. They grow up and they figure it out. I just don't feel like life's not going to give them a false sense of security. Life's going to be honest with them, and it's going to give them the truth, right? So if we give our kids a false sense of security that spending my time like this is going to give me the results of A's and B's, is that a false sense of security around what's truly possible? Again, I don't have an answer to it, and it's not. I can't even sit there and judge. It's because the struggle's real. It's just I think we need to spend time with our kids, with the community, looking at what's the real world implications, right? What are we really trying to build? I'm trying to build skills. Now we got Chat GPT involved with this whole mix, and that's going to be even another presentation that's going to be fascinating to look at the implications of that in promoting learning, because I think that's the other side of this. And Kristen, I really appreciate bringing that, because what does learning look like? Right? What does learning look like? Oh, it looks like catching up at the end of the quarter and passing all my work in. Is that what we want learning to look like as a system, as a community? Because it's not just one kid that's having the issue; it's a collective group. And where does that stop? Where do we reset? Kind of back to some of the basics. And again, from a teacher standpoint, we're losing teachers left and right because they're not really allowed to teach anymore, or at least they're not able to, because without due dates, it's really hard to maintain the learning process with the students. So what do? Do you know what you do? You read the book in the classroom. You know what? That's what we do. We put the audiobook on, and then you read the book in the classroom. Why? Because they're not reading it at home. Right? We show a crash course. You know why we show a crash course, which they can watch at home? We show a crash course because they can get the content in 10 minutes. And now they're ready for the test. Is that learning? No, that's not learning. That's sitting there watching a 10-minute crash course and then taking a test. Right? But so I don't know where it starts and stops, but I think it is really important to, again, I've kind of said a little bit of this already, but there's this other part that starts at a young age with self-directed learning. And that is when we are building intrinsic skills within our children. And, the part that starts is when you have your child have quiet time. And when they're children between the ages of maybe 7, I would say 6 and 11, you can promote quiet time. And it's a quiet time where you pick a non-stimulating activity like reading or art or crafts or time in your room where you sit and you just are still. Now, why do you practice that prerequisite skill of being still? Well, it's because it's one of the entry points for academics. It's one of the entry points for thinking. One of the entry points for metacognition is to be able to sit quietly with your own thinking and maybe read for 15 minutes, read for 20 minutes as part of the expectation. So self-directed learning is somewhat of a hard concept for a lot of students, especially coming out of the pandemic, where they spent 2 years really not learning. It was really just about submitting something and getting credit, or just pretending like you're engaged, but you're really not, because you're playing Fortnite with 5 or 6 of your other buddies for 2 years. So coming out of that, and what does self-directed learning look like? What's active learning look like? Well, it's hard to say, it's hard to ease back into that. Sometimes we just got to rip off the Band-Aid and say, active learning is a daily process of keeping up with assignments and keeping up with what's due and keeping up with what you need to be ready for when class starts tomorrow. Okay, so, oh boy, I wrote intentions. I think that should say interventions. So grammar didn't check it, of course, because they didn't know what I was trying to say. But I'm going to have to change that. Interventions to help our kids keep up with learning, and I'm going to frame it on learning, because I think when we think about our children, think about the most important skill for them to learn or develop, and that's a skill of maintaining or managing the learning process, keeping up with the learning, right? So one thing to start with for all of us is to really have a conversation with our children about their academic goals. We just don't do that enough. How do I know? Because I'll walk into a group of 50 freshmen and ask them, how many of you guys have thought about your academic goals? And I look like I'm talking about, I don't know, like who's on the water polo team in a town that doesn't have water polo. So it's a very important first entry point into really shifting the script, changing the script around priorities and intention and goal-directed persistence. You need a goal, right? And then you can match the behaviors that align with that goal, right? And then I sustain that goal-directed persistence over time. I'm going to make better progress. But I have to start with what's my goal? What's going to keep me focused on moving forward and managing the process of moving forward? So that's a great conversation for middle school kids and high school kids. They get it. They really like those conversations because their coach on the soccer, football, baseball field has those conversations, right? It's called winning and losing. It's called, at bats. It's called percentage of hits. Like, there's always ways of quantifying goals in sports. Can we do that in academics? Absolutely. We just don't do it enough. But you can talk about what's it look like to maintain daily goals. What's it look like to maintain short-term goals? Under short-term goals, I use the term 0 zeros. It's a term we use in our coaching practice that represents this mindset around keeping up. What would it look like if I passed everything in on time? So at the end of a week, I look at Aspen, or I look at Google Classroom, or I look at Schoology, and I see every assignment checked off, or I see every assignment submitted, right? How would I feel about that? Would I feel like a competent student if that was my outcome? Yes, definitely would. Okay. Would I feel like I'm on track to achieve my goals? Yes. Okay. Now, that short-term goal of 0 zeros has to go back to the daily goal. What's the daily goal in order to achieve that 0 0 mindset or outcome? Oh, Dr. Murphy, I've never been able to submit my assignments on time. That's okay. That's okay. I'm not asking you to change hands and start to write lefty when you're actually a natural righty. This is actually a meaningful goal that you might acknowledge is something worth targeting, because that's better than getting grades. Grades is like too lofty. It's too high level. It's too end of the semester type outcome. If I can just focus on the tasks in front of me, maybe I'm going to get there. Maybe I'm get there. But a bigger picture is, what do I want to do with that goal? Do I want to take that somewhere, like maybe pursue a college degree? Because if I can get 0 zeros moving myself forward through academic world of high school, I might be building the prerequisite skills that are necessary for that engineering degree at Worcester Polytechnical Institute. I'm definitely bright enough. I just really need to work on those executive function skills to keep up with the assignments. Now, see if that increases intrinsic motivation. See if it does. It's a great place to start, and keep going back to revisit goals. Right? Goals aren't achieved just by thinking about them once. Goals are achieved by thinking about them all the time. Okay? And then start to say, what is my plan? What's my plan to get there? Right? And put your child in the driver's seat. Now, I can't go into the teachers and say, please don't accept my child's homework late. It's just not a great place to start, but I can start in the home, and I could say, these are the expectations in this family. The expectation in this family is you get everything done and pass it on time. Oh, my teacher doesn't, I don't care what your teacher says. For you to be an effective student, you have to learn. If it's important to you and your goals, you have to learn how to keep up. Right? And in this family, we're not really teaching you how to catch up. We're not teaching you how to clean up your life, to look behind you. We're helping you move forward in life. We don't want you to see you in our basement. So if you spend too much time cleaning up or behind, you're might be in our basement when you're 22, and that's not good for either one of us. So we're going to help you move forward, right? So you're talking about this in the family. You're connecting to the values in the family. You're connecting to intrinsic motivation and their goal. And it can really work. That conversation over and over again is a proactive, empowering conversation that stretches a student forward in their life and emboldens them to own it. So in terms of just to kind of keep things simple, is the reason those arrows are there is you can't build study skills. You can't build active learning strategies. You can't build any of those higher order thinking skills without homework habits. Okay, so let's talk about just how important due dates are. You are not learning homework habits if due dates are optional. So you're telling me that if due dates are optional, I'm not learning homework habits because I'm just not doing the homework, right? I'm treating it as optional, so I don't have to do it. And therefore, I'm not consistently practicing active learning skills that are prerequisites to more advanced study skills that are necessary for whatever I might pursue after high school. Right, so it is a big deal. It is worth talking about, and it is worth being really authentic around just what this really means in the success plan of our students. Questions? Okay, so we're coming out of a pandemic. Where do we start? I have to go back to middle school habits in high school. Yeah, maybe. But jump right in and start owning it, and you'll start figuring it out quicker than if you pretend you already know it and that this isn't a big deal. It is a big deal. So let's figure it out. Time management tools. There's all different strategies that are out there. I'm not a big fan of like 101 different apps out there for time management tools. I just think like getting off of technology is smarter than just finding more ways to use it. For me, it's you get this is the Pomodoro technique is pretty tried and true. I'll show you right over here. That's the Pomodoro. Again, I'll talk about that's just setting a timer. Any timer will work. 25 minutes on, take a quick break. What's a quick break? I don't know. 50 push-ups. Why? Because that's cool. Like it keeps you offline, reboots your system, gets you energized again, and you're back at it, right? Or you go take the dog for a walk, go down and get a snack, but you stay offline. And kids get this. They definitely get it. They just haven't built their own sense of agency to follow a system that works for them. And so talk about learned helplessness. Like they are falling so short of trusting themselves because they're failing every time to build a system that works for them and to sustain it. So, but we do have to start somewhere. And it does help when there's accountability of due dates, but without that, you have your own family accountability. You have your own family system of accountability and responsibilities and expectations. Make them tighter, make them clearer, and your children will get it, right? It's like eating your vegetables and brushing your teeth. It's all the same thing, right? They don't balk at brushing their teeth anymore. They know they're supposed to brush their teeth, right? Some still struggle, of course, maybe, but for the most part, they get it. But teach them this process or show them this presentation. As some parents are like, so should my child watch this? Maybe they'll get something out of it. But getting started is the hardest part. It's the hardest part, even for adults, right? Getting in shape is easy to talk about. What's the hardest part? Getting started. So teach your child how to overcome that, right? How to grind, how to build a system that works getting started. For most students, ADHD, executive function, whatever the neurodiverse, getting started is the hardest part. Once they're started, they're typically more successful at following through, all right? And then you can adapt other strategies like prioritizing the work, making a system that gets hard stuff first, easy stuff later, reward yourself for a job well done. The Pomodoro technique is pretty cool to talk about and show students, yeah, there's techniques out there, man. You don't have to suffer. You just got to practice different techniques and strategies and see what works for you, right? Don't give up. Don't give up. And then practice something for a period of time and see what works. But time robbers is just another term for what are the things that are what are the problems, maybe consistent problems that are undermining my success plan. I want to move forward. These time robbers are sucking my time and attention and preventing me from moving forward. What are they? Students get it. Kids get it. Right, and if as they mature and develop in a sense of responsibility and accountability, they want to figure it out. They don't want to be a victim of Snapchat or social media or any of the platforms, or they don't want to be. It's just they found themselves coming out of pandemic or whatever, and they're just hyper attentive to it. So some students need a detox. They need to absolutely go through a detox program. I say program meaning they need to go through a couple months of being offline completely and reset their cognitive and emotional system and then start fresh. But talk about your homework zone. Where are you doing your work and what is the ideal preferred place to do it? If you can get there by and have a part of the process, it's a win-win. Parking lot is that place where I just put distractions, put things away. Where is that? And is it a family decision? Yes, make it a family decision. It's great. You know how many emails teachers get? Can you please take my child's cell phone? What? When did the cell phone become a teacher's responsibility? It is now, apparently. It's baffling. I love the state mandate that's getting rid of cell phones in schools. It's I think that's a kind of the problem. I don't know. Teachers shouldn't have to deal with that. Our job, but we do, of course, because kids have their phones out all day long in every class if they were allowed. And especially the ones we're talking about in this presentation. And so, and then just have some strategy that work for you, turning off notifications and getting into it. Oh yeah, those pouches. Yeah, we're starting those too, which is fine. It's just, it feels like it's so, it's reactive to us, to a problem that wasn't ours to begin with, but it is now. So we have pouches, kids walk in, they put their stuff in there. It does, yeah, it's good. I'm glad to hear it works, because we're starting that off with our freshman crew this year. So some teachers have piloted, but they've piloted at their own risk. So people that don't know, a lot of schools or teachers or schools, I should say, leadership is buying like shoe pouches or pouches that you can put in classrooms, and as students walk in, they put their cell phone into these little cubbies. And so they walk into class, they put their phone in the cubby that represents their number, and it stays there for the whole class. And they get it as they walk out. Kristen, was that similar to what you guys have?
Not exactly, because many students won't do that. So the Yonder pouches actually are like magnetically sealed and can only be sealed with a little machine thing at the end of the day. And the kids don't have a choice. They have to relinquish their cell phone into this pouch at the end of the day, because too many kids will say, oh, I don't have my phone, and then not put it in the cubby. So these Yonder pouches have been an absolute game changer. And it's funny, not to get off topic, but the kids actually like it. And I had students saying, I actually am talking to my friends at lunch, and when there's downtime in class, we're having conversations, and the kids actually really like a cell phone free academic environment.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I absolutely agree. When you put away when collectively the class culture shifts, when you take away
It's a different place.
Yeah, they look up, they look around, they make eye contact, they talk, and it just, to me, it's just, why are they there in the first place is a whole nother topic. I think the next generation, it's going to shift back, but it's for now, it's like, it's like I don't know. I want to go back to like smoking in the 60s, where you're like, what? Your parents smoked in the back of the dumpster behind the school? That was allowed? Yeah, that was allowed. So things change, pendulum swing. So this may be somewhat getting close to my end of my slides here. I've mentioned this a few times. I kind of put this in there, and this is a significant consequence. Is really the self-esteem and confidence, right? So how do you build self-esteem? How do you build confidence? Well, you build it by overcoming failure, by overcoming adversity, by overcoming struggles, by achieving goals. Okay. And so helping our children to move forward, this kind of goes back to the point, focusing on what's in front of me, because due dates matter. If due dates matter, then I have less to clean up because teachers aren't taking my work late, right? If teachers aren't taking my work late, by the way, you should research this. How many students, look at the classes with those hard teachers that actually don't take work late. Look at those classes and start to evaluate learning in those classes. Don't evaluate grades, evaluate learning. And you're going to see a very different outcome than the classes where students are allowed to wait till the end of the quarter to pass everything in. And so this sense of confidence around, I'm learning, I'm figuring this out, I'm getting the materials done, I'm persevering at midnight to get the assignments done. I'm overcoming the struggle of initiating the work on time. I'm getting better and better. So this is a big deal, and I think this is where I love spending the time, is really learning that goal-directed perseverance towards, what are my goal? My goal is to keep up. My goal is to get assignments done. My goal is to make a list and check it off. My goal is to learn how to overcome. What do you mean? Well, my goal is to learn how to overcome my challenges. My goal is to face adversity. Oh, you mean you don't want to run from the adversity? No, I want to face it, because that's going to help me get ready for life. That's going to help me get ready for the challenge ahead. I always say, I think in life, we sometimes default by thinking life's supposed to be easy. And I think if you want to build some real resilience to kids, teach them over and over again that life's not supposed to be easy. Life is supposed to be extremely difficult. Our job as humans is to try to figure out how to make it as meaningful as possible and as easy as possible. Well, how do I do that? Well, I have to work on my resilience. I have to work on my perseverance. I have to work on my of coming up with goals and maybe some strengths that I want to pursue and some interests that I really care about, and maybe some meaningful decisions around people I want to hang out with and life decisions that matter to me. And then I want to be able to focus on things that really matter. And I want to be able to overcome challenges, because if I can do that over and over again, life gets easier. Oh, okay. That's a good way to look at it. And so thinking about like kind of a typical student, right? It's like, what's on my mind? Monday night, what's on my mind? And there's this overwhelming picture of everything on my mind, from soccer practice to friends to Schoology to this mix of school stuff and this mix of social stuff. And I just kind of get stuck in this pattern of just thinking about it all. It's just this muddled type of emotions of things going in my head. And I don't really know how to make any decisions of it, so I don't make any, right? So what's tomorrow? Well, math is this, but I can start that in class. Oh, history, well, I have something in history, but I don't, he doesn't care. And in English, she won't check. And then science, maybe there's something, but that's too hard anyways. So I'll just do that later anyways. And then, oh, good, I have nothing due tomorrow. Right? So this cognitive process can be muddling and really confusing, and it's really hard to anchor the emotions. And so what we try to do with our students and our children that really can have these kind of emotionally overriding thought process is giving them some logical reference points, right? Meaning like, okay, I have a process. I look on Schoology. I have a process. I look on Aspen. I have a process. I make a quick list of what I know of every class. I don't think about it. I don't emotionally justify it. I just make a list of what I got to do. Why am I doing that? Well, I'm trying to think about getting my goal. My goal is to get everything done every day. My goal is to try to get everything done every day. Cool. And how do I do that? Well, I made a decision to start my work at 6:30 every night. How do you do that? Well, I just come home, and I know most of the nights I come home and I know I can start my work at 6:30 because I can come home, have dinner, and take a quick shower. And I know I talked to my parents and I came up with this plan that's really going to work for me because it matches my goals of getting good grades or getting all my assignments in every day. Awesome. That sounds like a good plan. Now, it doesn't make it easy, but at least having a plan is better than not. And I think that might be, yeah, that's cool. All right. About 7:24. I'm 6 minutes under schedule. This is remarkable. Questions?